everybody, and welcome to another edition of the ATACS podcast. This is going to be a special spoilercast edition. I am your host, Flex, from Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining me on May 11th, 2019 is Nate from Clayton, North Carolina. How's it going, Nate?
Hello to my fellow Shinobi.
How many Shinobi executions have you performed today?
I guess, none today, but it was a peaceful Saturday.
Good.
Yeah.
Even Shinobis need to rest sometime.
Yeah, you got to take a day off sometimes from chopping dudes' heads off. It's fine.
I've mostly been carving statues.
That other voice you hear is Ryan from New York, New York. No replacing Shinobi executions with carving statues.
That's how it goes, man.
Yeah.
You do your time, you do your tour of duty, you do your bunches of Shinobi executions, and then you go carve some statues.
And then you become a demon of hatred.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And then I will sever your immortality.
That's right.
We are here to spoil the crap out of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and being a spoiler cast, that means spoilers are going to be flying fast and free. This is your only spoiler warning. We will not give you any more from here on out.
I guess I actually spoiled something before the spoiler warning.
All right, we have to start this thing over. Already
Outtakes.
Whoops.
Oh, man. Yep, this is a spoiler cast, so we're going to spoil stuff. We have all played Sekiro. We wanted to talk about it. I think it's a cool game, and there's a lot to talk about with it. So we wanted to have a place to do that. And here we go. I guess first off, this is the latest game from Software.
From.
I love that.
Yeah.
From?
From.
So which part is the software?
From.com.
Oh, boy.
Now I'm curious if that's a website. Anyway, so Nate, I know Nate and I have played all of the Dark Souls games and Bloodborne. Ryan, just remind me, for my memory, you played Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne. Did you play any of the others?
Yeah, like I touched Dark Souls 2, but didn't really get into it, and that's about it for like the mainline From Software games. Gotcha. I have not played Tenchu either.
Neither have I.
No, I haven't either.
So none of us have any experience with this game's spiritual predecessor, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although it is very clearly like a From Software like game, and
yeah,
there are definitely Dark Souls-ish and Bloodborne-ish Souls game like design choices that are
absolutely
mostly to its benefit, I would say. But I have a few nitpicks, but it is it's got the branching paths and the hidden lore and the tough combat and all that stuff that you would expect to find in a Dark Souls or Souls game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the world structure in particular and the way that all flows is very much in line with their previous works. I think for me the biggest departure is very much the combat. And I was thinking we could dig into that up front, is in the way the combat works. To give the basic description, assuming anyone listening to this, I'm sure, has played the game, so I won't take long for the description. But it is very, you're a shinobi, you have a sword, and a lot of the combat is very melee sword based. You have some other tools that can allow for range combat, but you're very much in enemies' faces with swords, and it's very designed around parrying, and both you and your enemies not only have a health bar, but you have a posture meter. And whenever you block parry an attack, which you do by blocking with perfect timing, you start filling up a posture meter. And once it's full, their posture is quote unquote broken, and you can execute a death blow, which will instantly kill them. And some bosses need multiple death blows, but I found to be a really interesting system and very different from the previous games. And I really like the way it encourages you to like really get in the fray and really develop a like very skillful way of fighting. Like in a lot of other games, and this isn't even just Dark Souls games, in a lot of like third person melee action games, it's a lot of blocking and rolling, which can sometimes feel kind of like, I'm just going to throw the shield up and hold her. I'm going to spam rolls until I'm out of the way. And it can feel like a little imprecise sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I like how I thought it was cool how this game like really incentivizes you to like hone those skills of precision and like really learn attacks and get really adept at those timings of parrying. And it feels so cool when you actually like my favorite thing in this game is like deflecting a flurry of attacks and just being like, yeah, I just did that shit.
Mm-hmm.
What did you, I guess I've been talking for a little bit, like how did you guys approach the general sword play, and like do you think it worked, and what was your take on that?
I guess I might jump in here and well, so first off, actually, I mean, and maybe we'll get back to this a little bit, but for the most part, as much as I could, I actually played Sekiro kind of like an action stealth game. But the boss fights in particular pretty much require you to do the combat. And of course, when you get into scrapes, you pretty much have to know the combat. But outside of combat, I was actually trying to just assassinate people from like jumping off walls or whatever. And there's a whole dynamic to that. But yeah, as far as the combat goes, I definitely agree that like there's and I really like the way they kind of themed it. It's like in a lot of fights, I mean, sometimes, especially against maybe like the more supernatural, like monster opponents, you just need to like cut them up into little tiny ribbons. But against a lot of enemies, like you said, especially if you're having a duel with like a samurai, you can attack him and kind of like start driving him off balance. But if you do it too much, he'll parry you and then potentially set you up for like a nasty counterattack. So you have to like balance between. I mean, the game does let you play pure defensively. Like you can sit back and try to execute parries, and sometimes you do have to damage the enemy, or they'll just recover their posture quickly. But generally speaking, the game does allow you to play defensively. But yeah, I found that a better strategy, especially against some of the tougher bosses, was just to try to get in, let them attack maybe once or twice, and time a parry if possible. And then get into a rhythm of like, okay, I've parried their attack. I'm going to tap their block. I'm going to put in a couple, like one or two quick attacks just to keep them from recovering, like to pressure them and bait them into a weaker counterattack that I can parry. Because the other thing is if you just parry their attack and sit there, sometimes they'll wind up something like even bigger. But if you kind of come at them again, they'll respond by deflecting your attack and then usually retaliating with something more manageable. So it definitely creates this rhythm of like, okay, like block and attack, and it's different for every enemy. And there are a lot of other different mechanics, but definitely creates this it's more like a feeling of a duel where like, you kind of like expertly counter one of their attacks, and then you have to decide, okay, like I'll probably want to come back at them, maybe drive them off balance, or make sure they don't set up for some bigger counterattack or whatever. Plus, I mean, stepping on people's swords is just awesome.
Yeah, that's the most like badass animes thing. It's just like someone thrusts at you with a sword or spear, and you just like raise your foot up in the air and just slam it into the ground.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's pretty cool looking.
The feel of that game, I think they nailed the feel in most of the aspects. And that one in particular, like you just step on like somebody's sword and it's like, what now?
Yeah, it's really cool. I totally agree with what you're saying of like a lot of the fights can feel very different, and that's one thing I think I appreciate about this game is like there's a kind of like subtle but meaningful difference in the way you approach these. And you're also, I think, right, that a lot of times it feels like duels, and like a lot of the different enemies kind of have, you can see their like personality or battle tactics shine through in those duels, and you kind of have to adapt in very subtle ways and kind of learn how they move and attack. And it, like, there's a lot of, like, I've played a good number of third-person action games, and I feel like a lot of times you end up, or at least for me, I end up like kind of relying on a handful of like staple moves, and it's like, all right, as long as I can pull these off well enough, then I'll get through pretty well. But I feel like this game did a really good job of constantly like making me consider how I was participating in the fight and make some little tweaks for each enemy. And then, of course, it controls very well. Like, the action just feels good, like Ryan said. And Nate and I have talked about this before, but I feel like they've, in a way, made like the best lightsaber fighting game ever made.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, when you have a one-on-one duel with like another ninja type character who has a sword, and you're just like constantly like clashing and clanging and like dodging and deflecting, like, it just, those fights feel really cool. Like I recorded my fights against some of the bosses in the game, and some of them are more ninja type characters, and it's like, you know, obviously there's a period of like learning the boss and dying and that kind of stuff, but then when you watch the successful run, it's like, wow, that's like a really flashy looking ninja and or lightsaber fight type thing. Like, yeah, really cool.
Yeah, it really is. I agree with both of you have been saying about this combat system, that it is a great dueling system. It has all these great like back and forth between you and the AI. Like, I think it's really cool how it takes a lot of the fundamentals that worked in the Souls games of like learning enemy animations and responding to them. It does that in the same way, but then takes it to the next kind of level as far as precision is concerned, because you do need to not just like, oh, recognize the boss is going on the offense, I need to hold up my shield or just get out of the way. It's like, oh, I have to actually figure out the exact moment that I need to parry this attack in order to get anything out of it. Because you can block things, but in general, that's, while better than taking straight health damage, it's not gaining you anything, and you are risking your posture being broken too. So I really, really like the basic core system of it, and I really like the dual nature of most of the boss fights, like you guys have said. I think that the animation variety is key, like you were talking about, how every type of enemy is a little bit timing different. They have a little bit different attacks. You know, sometimes you could get them into repetitive patterns by like forcing them into a parry, and then they always do one attack after they parry you. That's true of some enemies, which is kind of, I don't know. I guess like it feels like an exploit because the rest of the game feels so responsive to what you're doing, and like the enemy is thinking about how to beat you. So the fights where they don't fall into that feel great, because it does feel like a duel against a mindful and present opponent who is trying to defeat you, instead of just like learning an AI routine. Like, it feels like it reaches a different level in a lot of those fights. Yeah.
And I liked what you were saying about the animations, because I think one really key thing about this game, at least for me and how I played it, hopefully it was for you guys as well, is this game runs really smooth.
It does.
And I think the animations are really incredible, and not just like, I think aesthetically they look really cool.
Yeah.
But I think mechanically they're also really important, because they do, like, you have to see how enemies are moving. And I think there a lot of care was clearly put into animating all of the enemies in this game to make what they're doing very clear while still looking rad.
Right, because it's thematically cool, like you were saying earlier, how you get some flavor about how the enemy might think or act. Like the more soldierish, well-trained, like seasoned veterans have very like elegant and fast sword flourishes, or they might have like the attacks that always messed me up are like the more delayed attacks where they like halfway move their sword to
Those
hit
freaking
you.
Ichimonjis.
Yeah. It's like I'm gonna pull up my sword and look like I'm about to swing at you, and then wait literally half a second and then swing.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you know what you're doing with a sword. Whereas some of the more like fanatical enemies or enemies that are ruffians or just
looking guys.
Yeah, your lower level guys, they'll just kind of run at you swinging, and you're like, no, you've got nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I almost felt in some ways that this, I mean, I don't know if or what level, which the Dark Souls games kind of did this too, is it feels like they sort of borrowed a little bit more from like fighting games in that sense. So you're talking about like some of the more advanced enemies would like delay their attacks. And, they also, a lot of enemies have these attack patterns, and sometimes they can actually flow into different combos.
Yes.
Which for the most part was pretty cool. There were a few that I found kind of irritating where you would like block the first part of a combo and then the boss could set up into either like a thrust, like a sweep, or like a quick attack. And some of those that were executed a little more quickly, I occasionally got irritated with, because it's like, come on, like, because even in a fighting game, like, I'm not the most skilled. Like I've played some competitive fighting games, but I'm not the most skilled, and sometimes it's just a matter of like, unless those animations are pretty readable, it can be just a matter of like guessing. Like, okay, well, I'll try blocking here. It's like, oh, he swept. I guessed wrong.
Yeah. Generally, when blocking, I was fine. Once I learned that anything was blockable unless it had the there's a term for it, but the attacks that you can't block. Perilous attacks, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's it. Perilous.
And those are always one of three. It was grab, sweep, or thrust. And whenever I saw the perilous attack thing, I was always very like, what do I do? Jump. I don't know.
You like jump away from the enemy.
Yeah. Sometimes jump away is like the safest option. Although some of the thrusts, they were smart about it. Yeah, they'll chop you out of the air like with some of the thrust attacks.
Yeah. So when some enemies, a lot of the ones for the first half or so of the game will kind of only use one of the three. So when you see the attack, you're like, okay, they're going for their grab, or they're going for their thrust or their sweep, and you kind of learn that. But then they start adding in enemies that do two or all three of them, like switching around, and then it becomes really hard. You have to really learn what animations are following into that. They're going to lead to which one you can counter correctly.
Yeah, I feel like those were the attacks where I had to pay the closest attention to the animations, and like Ryan was saying, those were the times where I struggled to identify what attack was coming. It was usually those situations where they were doing a perilous attack, and I knew it was an enemy that had access to multiple types of perilous attacks. And they would just do it so quickly, like Ryan was saying, that I couldn't make the decision quickly enough. Like I many times in this game stepped forward into a sweep or a grab.
Yeah.
Here comes a thrust. I'm going to step forward. Oh, just got smacked down.
But when you learn it, like if you get it down and like you figure out their animations, and it's like, oh, you're trying to thrust, step on your spear. Oh, you're trying to sweep, I'm going to jump and kick you in the face. Or you're going to grab, I'm going to step to the side and hit you in the back. Like once you're like hitting multiple of those in one exchange, along with your parries, like there's nothing cooler.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant because I don't want to sound too hyperbolic, but I feel like just the one-on-one fights in this game probably among my favorite like third-person combat engines in almost anything I've ever played. Like I played this game for 40 or 50 hours and I never got tired of the combat.
Yeah, 100%.
And yeah, when you get in that flow, like when you learn how to fight a boss, and like my ramp from like there were a lot of bosses or mini bosses in this game where I'd go in the first time against them and I would die in like 3 seconds.
And yeah, and I had the same thing, and I would just be like, "This is impossible."
Yeah, I'm like, how
Like,
in the world?
but it would not take long.
No,
me
it
to
didn't.
figure it out.
Yeah, it's like I would die in like 5 seconds and be like, how is this even possible? And then I'd go in the next time and like I would last like 8 seconds. Then I'd go in and then like I would keep getting longer, and like after 4 or 5 tries, I'd be almost beating them, and I'm like, oh, okay, you just like got to get used to like a couple of their tells, and then all of a sudden you go from dying in 10 seconds to basically beating them.
Yeah, usually for me it was like I would go from being nowhere close for a couple tries to just like completely destroying them.
Yep. That was a lot of my experience. Yeah, I'd usually have like 3-ish tries where I'd just get creamed.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I'd have this big jump to where I'd basically almost beat them, and then it might take me a couple more tries to like actually finish the fight. But like there was always a big jump. It's like once you learn a couple of their attack patterns, it's a big jump. And once I realized that flow, I was like, all right, like I stopped, then I'd go into a fight, get creamed, and it's like, all right, I'll figure it out. It's good.
I got it.
And I thought that like process of mastering was, I mean, a lot of their games have kind of traded on that feeling of reward when you get through a fight, but it still feels different. It felt less like a war of attrition and more of like, I just mastered this thing.
Right.
And that was I really enjoyed that. And it was like to the point where like when I finished some of my favorite fights of the game, which some of them were some of the harder fights, it was almost like when I finished it was like, I want to do that again because I mastered that and that felt good.
That's exactly how I felt for a lot of the fights, especially the very last fight. I was just like, I want to keep fighting this guy.
Yeah. This is fun. Let's do this all day.
Yeah.
One thing I am kind of curious about, and I think Sekiro may have leaned into this a little bit more, but I think From Software, actually, I think they did this in both Bloodborne and Dark Souls, from what I remember. Like, I remember, particularly in Dark Souls, one of my favorite fights in that game was actually just the final boss, which I think it was, Gwen, Lord of Cinders or whatever. Because it was definitely challenging, but it felt sort of like a pretty straightforward kind of like,
that's a good fight. Fair
fight. Yeah. It's like, and I sort of felt that the same way in Sekiro, like more with I think they leaned in a little bit more into like more human opponents, although there were occasionally some of these like supernatural boss fights.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't always a huge difference, but I did feel that I tended to more enjoy, and of course their final boss fight was pretty much like more of a human opponent. I think that's something they've been good about doing, is like maybe they just recognize that just feels like kind of a straight fair fight, but I think they kind of leaned into that a lot more, because a lot of your big fights are just against like these kind of like epic samurai. Like,
I think so for sure, and I think it works really well with this combat system. Yeah.
So one other thing I wanted to talk about the action gameplay, depending on if you guys have anything more about the combat, was circling back to what I was talking about earlier with sort of like the sort of action-y stealth gameplay.
Yeah.
Because really, I guess, I don't know if something tipped me off to it or if the game just kind of like leads you into this direction, but I definitely approach this game more as like, I don't know. I mean, Metal Gear is not really a great analogy, but like more as like I'm not going to run in holding my block up and try and take everybody on at once. It's more like, okay, I'm going to use these grappling points and I'm going to shimmy along this wall and like try to assassinate as many of these dudes as possible. Like, or one thing that's kind of neat about it, is that And I like this about some of the other games that From has done is, in some cases the rules apply to bosses as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of bosses where you can't sneak up on them. It's just like a staged duel. But occasionally, like some of the tougher enemies or bosses, like you can just kind of like sneak through the patch of grass and like lead off with a death blow, and like then you don't have to like fight that shinobi hunter like for 2 rounds. You only have to fight him for 1 round.
Right.
Yeah, especially the mini bosses. I feel like most of them you can get one death blow and basically cut the fight in half, which was really cool. I really liked the stealth component of this game.
Yeah, they definitely lead you in to that mindset in the start of the game, I think, because you do the first whole like very beginning section without a sword and you're just practicing the stealth mechanics. So they definitely tutorialize that pretty heavily. And then I think it's just kind of necessary for the first part of the game. Before you've really gotten a handle of how the game works and your stats are low and you don't have tools and things like that. You just kind of have to take advantage of the stealth and mobility aspects to make it through those places in one piece, unless you just come into this game somehow with like amazing precision reactions to be able to parry everything.
Yeah. Like with combat or whatever.
Yeah. So I think it definitely leads you pretty strongly to like stealth is the way to go until you can't. I
think even late game, it's probably good that they do that up front and not get you off starting to think that you can just run in headfirst and take on everything.
Yeah. I think it's really good.
Yeah. Even late game, even though you do get more health, more healing gourds, and you get more used to the combat and all that, like there are just areas of that game that just have, like, we've talked a lot about the duels in this game. When you get ganged up on, this game is hard.
Yeah.
And you really don't want to get in those situations. And there are a lot of, like, once you get to the mid and late game, there are a lot of situations where you could just get in really bad situations if you didn't stealth around and kill a handful of enemies first.
Yeah.
So it's probably good that they kind of force you into it early on. So because I could totally see people otherwise like getting into the mid game and having just run in head first on everything. Then all of a sudden the way they've been playing for 20 hours doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. I definitely like the stealth early on, and I think it really does add a lot to the experience early on. I think I pretty much stopped using stealth by the back third or so.
Oh yeah.
Just kind of running up to guys and killing them.
Nice.
I got a lot more aggressive with that, which, I mean, the stealth in general is pretty fast paced. Like, you can grapple around and like enemies. There are certain enemies which are very keen to spot you, but a lot of the common enemies, like as long as you're not like right in front of them.
Yeah, and part of that is that some of the upgrades in the game negate the need to use the like very prescribed stealth mechanics, because there are some upgrades that just make you harder to see, which means you can kind of just run up to guys.
I got those all really of those early.
As soon as I could.
Yeah. And then there's the ninjutsu techniques that allow you to do some crazy stuff. So if you just kind of can run up on one guy. I did this a lot late game, where the first ninjutsu technique you get is like a spray of blood. If you get a death blow on somebody, you can spend a few spirit emblems to conceal yourself.
Yep.
And I would just like sprint in. Whoever had their back to me was getting backstabbed because they wouldn't notice me soon enough. And I would just spray blood everywhere and then start cutting people down.
Yep. Yeah, I did that multiple times. I remember using that a lot in Fountainhead because those, whatever they're called, the
nobles,
things that
Miss Nobles or whatever.
The nobles that enfeeble you.
Yeah, they're real mean.
Yeah, and there's a room with a bunch of them that, like, basically if you attack one, the others are going to see you. But I would use that to like reset my stealth. So yeah, you can kind of my one bummer with the stealth is you can kind of tease parts of it. You can kind of do that Nate was talking about, of like kind of chaining that smoke ninjutsu.
Which that part's cool. The part that I don't like, which I think you were about to lead to, is when you can just like run in and death blow somebody and then run away.
Yeah. You can like if you happen to get seen, you can just like go find a rooftop to chill out on for like 10 seconds until they reset the routines and forget you existed.
Because all enemies in the game will just like leash back away from you if you get far enough. Yeah, and you're way faster than everything.
Yeah, which I don't know. I mean, that's a common stealth game thing. Like,
yeah, but it's not fun.
Yeah, I don't. I hope someday someone can find a better alternative. But
yeah,
I mean, that aside, I did really like stealth.
Yeah, I think the stealth is a good addition for sure.
Because it made the game not just constant combat. Like,
right.
It gave another edge to exploring the environments, which the environments in this game are like, I feel like their games have been on this trajectory all along. I feel like the environments in this game are incredibly rich and dense. Like,
they are.
I feel like I would enter one area that's basically the equivalent of like one large room. And you like get up somewhere high near the beginning because you grapple up, and I look around and I'd be like, all right, this area doesn't look so large. And then you start roaming around and it's got like 5 vertical levels to it, and it's got all these nooks and crannies, and it's got like these different pathways that the AI walking around, like their route that they take. And it's like you find all these hidden items everywhere, and it's like spend a half an hour basically exploring one room, and it's like, like it's just very dense rooms. And like when I was near the end of the game, kind of like re-exploring some areas, looking for stuff, like going back through areas is like, this area actually wasn't that big, but it took me forever to like really comb through the first time.
When I went back to some of the starting areas late game, when you get the ability to dive underwater, I like ran through a bunch of the early areas again.
Yeah, I did a similar thing.
I ended up.
It is very funny, like running through those areas, like all these enemies that I like meticulously stealth killed around and like took forever exploring these environments. I'm just like literally sprinting through, just like attacking everybody just straight up, not doing any death blows. And you get through those areas in like 2 minutes when it took me like 2 hours before.
Yeah, it's same here. Yeah, it's like, but I think that density to the environments really helps stealth be interesting, because it makes you want to like find the stealthy way through those areas.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious at this point. What kind of we kind of mentioned a few things there, but what kind of, in addition to your sword and your grappling hook, this game also has both a skill tree and also has these prosthetic tools that you can use, and there's an upgrade tree for those.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious from both of you, I guess we can kind of do these simultaneously. Like, what kind of skills from the skill tree did you lean into? What kind of prosthetic tools did you mostly use and upgrade? Like, what was kind of your play style with all of those, the customization options, I guess?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start by saying that I don't think I love the skill trees in this game very much.
Okay.
Especially the prosthetic upgrade tree.
That tree is weird.
Yeah, I just kind of don't like it. Like, it's not clear.
I put many points. Like, there's the bottom half of that tree which has like a bunch of passive skills, and then I don't think I put like maybe like 2 points into the top half of that tree.
Right.
I think it sounds like, Ryan, you're talking about the actual skill tree that's the prosthetic arts, and Nate, are you talking about the at the sculptor that upgrade tree?
Yeah, well, I guess I was generally saying I don't know that I like any of the upgrade trees in this game.
Okay, gotcha.
But specifically, yes, I think the sculptor's tool upgrade tree is a mess.
Right. I think it's weird because it crisscrosses in ways where it's like, all right, I don't care about the Mist Raven thing or whatever. So, but I have to upgrade that twice to get the thing I want.
Right.
It was like that. I wish you could just upgrade each of the tools individually.
Yeah.
If there were upgrades at all.
But even like trying to figure out what upgrades I would want was like I don't know, like
Yeah,
aren't
they're
very clear.
partially unclear. Yeah, and there were a few that were like really helpful for me in some fights. Like there's what's the is it just the umbrella?
Yeah, I don't remember what it's called, but it's the umbrella in my mind.
Yeah, it's like one of the upgrades is like the iron umbrella, and then there's like the Phoenix double or something like that.
Yeah.
And they kind of have descriptions that kind of hint at these things, but it's like one of the umbrellas completely blocks all fire attacks, and there's another umbrella that completely blocks all of the apparition attacks.
Yeah.
And it's like key. Yeah, and both of those were amazingly useful in certain fights. Like I really relied on those in certain fights, but it's like if I like they weren't quite clear enough, and I feel like a number of tools had similar things where it's like, man, if I really understood the potency of this, like I would have gone for it sooner.
So you're actually touching on something that was one of my sort of overall complaints with Sekiro in general. And I mean, this is true somewhat of this whole series in that they usually kind of give you hints about which direction to go or what to use, but it's sometimes those hints are too obtuse or they're misleading or, or you just miss them. And I felt like, we're talking about the tools, but I felt like there were other parts of the game, mostly around combat. Like I would stumble into a boss fight and the boss fight would be really hard. And it would be like, okay, am I playing badly or did I just miss the trick?
Yeah.
And in some cases, it was because I had missed the trick. Like, and one good example of that is the purple spirit guys, because I found divine confetti in a separate location, and I kept trying to use it on the quote unquote infested. So Sekiro has at least 3 different types of undead.
Yeah,
and it hints to you that the divine confetti is effective against some form of undead. So I kept using it against like the infested and against these like spirit enemies that you encounter in like the Mist Valley. And it did nothing but I didn't realize that if I used it against this like shaman who shoots spirits at you, that you would it would allow your sword to block those things.
Yeah.
Because when you can't block those, you basically can't fight the guy. He'll just shoot those things at you.
Also attacking that guy, I think that's the Shichiman warrior. Attacking them without divine confetti, like you basically do no damage at all. But then attacking them with divine confetti, you like deal tons of damage. So you basically need divine confetti to beat those guys. But yeah, using against other seemingly apparition type enemies is ineffective.
Yeah, so there were multiple occasions. That was one of the most egregious in my mind because that's a consumable item too.
Yeah, which gets into another one of maybe my biggest complaint with this game and their games in general is I just do not like consumable items. Because like if you have fights that basically require divine confetti, like I basically never want to be in a situation where I have to go farm stuff.
Right.
That's just not fun. I like the way they do the gourds and the healing flasks and those kind of things in their game where whenever you rest, you refill and it's just a limited use per life. I think that works fine. But yeah, whenever I have to go farm something, that's just not fun.
Yeah. So I guess I'm derailing the prosthetic argument or the prosthetic point a little bit, but I did feel like that was a theme throughout parts of the game. And, it's the same with the Mortal Blade. The first time you fight the enemies that can't be killed, it's like, well, actually, if you progress slightly farther, you get this weapon that allows you to kill them. And like, occasionally it's just like you beat your face against stuff like that or you trip over it or whatever. And it's like, just give it. The puppeteer ninjutsu, the puzzles you had to solve by using the puppeteer ninjutsu also. Yeah. That drove me crazy because I tried to use the whistle. Because there's a spot where you have to, the game tells you, you need to tame a monkey to get past the section. And it was right after you get the puppeteer ninjutsu. Well, I didn't use the ninjutsu that often. Like it just wasn't my play style. So like, but you get the whistle in a similar section. So I would platform my way to this past all these enemies into this section with this snake, and there would be a monkey there.
Yep.
And I would use the whistle on him, and it didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So some of that non-obvious stuff kind of aggravated me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure.
But
I can kind of see what they're going for with wanting you to pay attention and think through those things. But yeah, I think there are cases, including the ones you mentioned, where it's just not clear.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is I experimented a lot. I tried Divine Confetti on a bunch of different types of enemies. I just happened to guess, I missed the correct one. But that kind of circles back to what I was going to say about the prosthetics as well, is actually for the first 2/3 of the game, I hardly used any prosthetic tools.
Yeah.
And kind of I think you guys were saying, I tended to invest pretty heavily into passive skills.
Yeah.
Because I like the shuriken, and they were, it's pretty clear how they worked.
Yep.
And occasionally I would bust out the axe or the flamethrower, when it was pretty obvious. But I actually tried the spear on a few different types of enemies, and it never, it's supposed to be able to strip armor. I never found an enemy that happened.
Yeah. So,
and usually actually what would happen is you would try this weapon, that you never really use that often, or this tool, and the enemy would just punch you in the face.
Yeah. If you don't use them, whatever, as with a lot of these games, if you experiment with something and it doesn't quite work, or it's not the right time or whatever for it, it's usually a very risky thing, and you punched. I never actually pulled the spear. Was the most confusing thing to me in the entire game, because I never pulled armor off anyone either. And in retrospect, I thought about this after I killed this enemy, and it was when I went back to. I only saw this enemy a handful of times in the game. The only time I remember where they were was at the Hirata estate. Second time you go there, and it was one of those not an ogre, but a larger soldier. Sometimes they would have wooden shields, but this one had a wooden basically chest piece. It was almost like a breastplate made of wood. And I thought about it after I killed that enemy by keep continually running around to its back, but I thought maybe that's what they meant, because when I first fought the armored knight on the bridge, I thought, oh, this is where I must use the spear, but nope. That is not where you use it.
Exactly. Yeah, I tried it on the armored knight, and again, that fight was, it was a fun fight, but it was basically a trick.
Yeah, and I didn't realize, it took me a couple times to realize the trick as well.
You basically have to get to where you can pretty much spank that enemy, to figure out, oh, I'm actually pushing him around.
Yeah. Yep, pretty much. So yeah, there are definitely a handful of things like that. I was similar to you in that early on, I didn't really use many of the tools, kind of just stuck to the shuriken. Once I got and early on, there are a couple of smaller shield guys, and the axe description says it breaks shields. So I'm oh, okay, I'll use that on these guys.
Yeah.
That one was fairly clear. But yeah, for the most part, I used shurikens for a while. At some point, I got really attached to the firecrackers, though. And I started using those a lot. That was certainly my most used, especially against the first major boss who rides a horse. It was really effective against him.
Yeah.
And the bull bosses and some of the other bosses. It was actually really effective against the I'm forgetting this boss's name. Do what?
The monkeys?
Oh, it was probably effective against them. The corrupted monk is who I'm thinking of, was a boss. It was for some reason really effective against the corrupted monk for me.
Oh wow!
Yeah, there were a good number of times where the firecrackers were just yep, this gets me out of a jam. So that was kind of a staple. The hat, like I said, I used in a couple fights. The flame resistant hat was key for me against the Demon of Hatred, and the apparition hat was very helpful against the headless and the Shichiman warriors. Because it just blocked literally all of their attacks. The Shichiman warrior fights were hilarious because I would just put on the hat and like just walk towards them as they were like throwing all those purple balls. And I'm
They
like,
fire
you
these,
literally,
like,
you
giant
literally can't
laser
hurt me at
beams.
all. Yeah, exactly. You just block all of it. I'm like, all right, this is cool, I guess.
Yeah, that is funny because yeah, similarly in the first half to 2/3 of the game, I didn't use many prosthetic tools, but then in the back third of the game, I found myself, and partly that is because I just ran into some difficult fights, and because I was trying to, like, I didn't beat the Shichiman warrior till like after I had gotten like the Divine Dragon Tears, and I was like, I really kind of want to see, what's like how, like, I really just want to figure out how I'm supposed to beat this guy this late in the game.
I did a similar thing late game. I went back and did all of those guys and the headless.
The headless, yeah. So I did kind of experiment a lot more there, and yeah, like you said, I like the loaded umbrella a lot, and it ended up being kind of key. So I mean, whenever that stuff worked, it was kind of cool. It's just and I even found there was one part where I was fighting those. There's like a group towards the very end of the game. If you backtrack through certain areas, like there's one area that gets like overrun with monkeys.
No.
And there are like two of the guys with two of the white baboons with like the beards and the two katanas.
Right.
Which are pretty tough to fight, and that's a really hard group to sneak up on. So I used the whistle on one of them.
Nice.
And he started attacking the other one, and that made that fight a lot easier. So I mean, when those tools worked the way, like when you kind of figured the trick out, it could be pretty cool. But yeah, throughout the course of that game, it felt like more often than not, especially when you're like kind of outgunned by everything, it's like, hey, I'm going to hit you with this spear, and the samurai or bandit or ogre or whatever just kind of looks at you and then like kills you.
And I do get the sense that most of the tools are kind of intended for like not general purpose use. I think they are meant for more specialized use. So I think they are intended to be reserved for when the situations they're made for. Some of them I never really figured out those situations. Like I don't think I ever really used the Mist Raven Feather or the whistle or the flamethrower or the spear, as we already talked about. Like about half of them I just never really used that much. I've seen some chatter of some people apparently love the Mist Raven thing.
I think the Mist Raven is actually one that is kind of general purpose use. Like I don't know that there's like, I think you're right that a lot of the tools in this game are built as like a hard counter to something specific.
Yeah.
But I think that's one that's maybe not.
Okay.
And that meant that I never tried to use it because I never thought, oh, this is the hard counter situation.
Yeah, the firecrackers were I feel like everyone has their one general purpose one, and for me it was firecrackers and kind of the shuriken as well.
Yeah, for me it was definitely those two. I always had those two equipped.
Yeah, and then the third one was whatever specific case I had. And the Mist Raven, I guess, just maybe it came after I had those other two, so I was kind of already set on those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
I experimented with it some, particularly in the last boss fight when I was kind of struggling to get through it, and it was neat. Like you like put up this like dodge stance that lasts for like a second, so it has a bit of a generous window, and then if something attacks, if an attack comes through you, you'll like teleport in like a direction. But I don't know that I liked it better than the umbrella. Like there were a couple times I was able to use it and like punish like one of the more challenging attacks, like the cross slash that will damage you through your block. There were a couple times I like dodged that using the Mist Raven Feather and counterattacked, but then there were a couple times like I just mistimed it or the follow up hit me or whatever, and it was like, whatever.
Did you either of you find much use for the flamethrower or the whistle?
The whistle is hilarious, but I don't know that it's actually good.
Okay.
Other than that one situation. Although there is something, there were some hints in the game that made me think that the whistle might have like a story play that I wanted to talk about a little bit later. So we can circle back around to that.
I did use the puppeteer ninjutsu a lot late in the game, though. I feel like the whistle, from the descriptions at least, maybe could have kind of a similar use in some situations. But I definitely really leaned into the puppeteer thing late in the game of like target a bigger enemy in the fight and sneak up on it and turn it and then start engaging other things. Like when you go back to the Ashina outskirts late game and like things are on fire, I like was able to stealth up behind one of the it's a mini boss early on, but one of the big ogres.
Oh yeah.
And you can mind control him with the puppeteer.
That's fun.
It's like this towering, 20-foot tall ogre, and it's fighting for you.
That's great. I didn't know you could mind control them.
Yeah, you totally can. Which makes me wonder if you could do it against in a New Game Plus, if you could do it against the boss. Probably not, but yeah, I thought that was pretty great.
Yeah, I had some similar funny situations with the whistle because because it affects beast type enemies, it makes them go crazy and start attacking anything in sight.
Yeah.
So there are like a couple situations
how he turns against each other.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple situations where you can like just create complete bedlam because you'll just turn a couple wolves against their masters or against each other, but I don't know that I ever found it like super useful. It's just more funny.
Yeah, there was one mini boss. He's like one of the purple ninjas, and he calls a bunch of wolves to fight for him.
Yeah,
and every time he did that, that was the only time I used the whistle. Is I would whistle and turn the wolves back against themselves.
That's great.
Yeah, but similar to some of the other situations we talked about with the tool upgrades, there was one whistle upgrade. I think it was called Malcontent. That said it. I forget the exact description, but it made it sound like it did something specific with like apparition or supernatural enemies, and so I used that on the Demon of Hatred, and it like totally throws him off if you whistle at him.
Really?
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like that is kind of the thing with a lot of the tools is like, because sometimes I look at the upgrades for like, I don't know, the spear or there was a sword prosthetic tool I never used, like the
poison sword.
Oh, the Sabi Maru.
Yeah.
I think honestly they could have. I like the way the upgrade system worked in that you had some strict upgrades, but then you could always go back to lower versions, like if things started costing more or whatever. But I do think like them pruning, if From Software had pruned those trees and maybe made the tools not necessarily general purpose, but just have some more of those interesting interactions where it's like, okay, if you whistle at the flame demon, like you might not think to do this, but it actually does something kind of useful.
Yeah, those hard counters are fun when you find them. But a lot of the tools, like you guys were already saying, I just didn't find those uses for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess kind of transition a little bit, unless you guys have anything else to say about the tools.
I was just going to say, and I don't know if this was just in upgrades in general, because you also mentioned I was going to kind
of bring up the skill trees again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's actually what I wanted to talk about as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I guess for me, it was similar to the tools in that the active combat skills, I ended up not really using that much for the first half or more of the game. And I mean, some of them were kind of fun or situationally useful, like the Ichimonji. Like, if you were in kind of a standoff with certain types of enemies, you could just kind of like pound on their block or whatever.
Whack them on the head.
But by and large, like I was talking about with the tools, the prosthetic tools, especially in the early part of the game when you're kind of squishy, like a lot of times experimentation just gets you killed.
Yeah. I think it is kind of a weird case because so many of the active skills and the tools follow that same pattern of like, yes, if you use it in the exact right situation, it's going to get you a lot. But if you're just kind of experimenting, like you said, you're going to end up getting killed or just wasting resources.
Yeah, there were actually some boss fights where I unequipped my active combat skill because I found
You would
when I
accidentally
was
use it, yeah.
yeah, like if an enemy like if I saw an opening and kind of toggled between block and attack,
Mm-hmm.
or like vice versa, if I started to attack but then I was like, oh wait, no, I need to block, like I would start one of those animations.
Yeah.
I did that all the time.
Yeah,
accidentally, like to the point where I mostly actually traveled without a combat art equipped.
Yeah.
I actually unequipped my stealth for some of the final boss fights because the click to stealth on the left stick, because I also kept doing that, and I was like, this might actually be like delaying like important like combat, and it seemed to help. But anyway,
that's funny.
The one combat art I did find useful towards the end game, and again, part of this was because I bounced off the final boss a couple times, was you get one called Flowing Strikes. And it's the same attack that Genichiro uses against you, where he kind of like spins around and does like a 5-hit combo. But that actually does chip damage through the enemy's block.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it doesn't cost any spirit emblems to use. So I found that if I was going, especially because, in some of the boss fights, if the enemy has a full HP bar, their posture regenerates like almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So in some of those fights, if I was having trouble getting counterattacks, but I saw openings to kind of tap their block, I would just use that combo, and usually they would let me finish it, and it would deal like a bit of chip damage as though I had hit them with the sword.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it was, like you said, I mean, when you found the use cases where they worked, that actually was super useful because it let me get that vitality damage in without having to like force, misses or make really risky blocks. But then but yeah, like that was one of the few that I actually found consistently useful.
I can't say that I really use the combat arts to any effect throughout the whole game.
I think I mostly stuck with the whirlwind slash and just used it when I got surrounded.
Yeah, I had that for a while, and then at some point I had when you get the mortal blade, you get like a big mortal
giant
mortal blade strike that's kind of like the whirlwind slash, just a big area slash that does a ton of damage.
Yeah. I totally did that on the gaggle of monkeys before the Guardian Ape fight.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely mostly stuck to passives in the skill trees, and a lot of skill trees I just left unfinished. So it was just like, all right, I got the passives I want, and just kind of left that.
I mean, the passives were, a lot of them, especially if you found them, a lot of them were super powerful.
Yeah,
they were good. A couple of them are pretty much, I feel like, mandatory. The one that restores health on death blows, I feel like is pretty much mandatory to get.
Yeah, you can get that one. You can get one of those through the skill tree, and I think there's at least one that you get as a boss reward.
I think you're right.
The same one, and the same with the one that does posture damage on a death blow, which I never thought sounded that useful.
Yeah, I feel like even when my posture got broken, it wasn't like I didn't get punished that hard for it.
That's actually something that I think is a minor flaw in the combat system that we didn't talk about earlier.
Yeah.
Is that it makes it seem like... Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't really stress, like, we've kind of alluded to a couple times, we didn't say outright, like, the balance of your posture meter refills pretty quickly if you're at full health. So you do want to get some actual health damage on enemies to make their posture not refill so quickly. And that's also what incentivizes you to get in there and be aggressive.
Right.
To not let their posture refill. But at the same token, like, when their posture breaks, you get a death blow. But when your posture breaks, like, they don't really seem to always take advantage of it. So it kind of reduced the penalty, like the penalty for just blocking too much. Like, I feel like they wanted to have this balance where you couldn't block too much. And I feel like they kind of didn't get that balance just because you're not really punished.
Yeah, like I feel like they got away with it by the threat of it for a while for me. Like I was always watching my posture for the first half of the game. And then at some point I started getting my posture broken by bosses and they would just not do anything. Right. And like not only do they not immediately just like kill you the way you would expect it to work,
they usually back off.
They usually just kind of back off. And then it's not like in, the Souls games, if you have your stamina meter depleted, you basically can't do anything until it regenerates on its own.
Yeah.
And there's not even an equivalent of that in this game. If your posture is broken, you're staggered for a second and then it immediately goes to 0.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is not very punishing.
No, it's not. And I think that's something that I don't know if just them getting a death blow on you would be too harsh or not, but like they definitely needed to do something bad.
I mean, I feel like that would be warranted.
I think it would be, yeah.
Even if you didn't, then they should get a hit on you that does decent damage.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really have a problem with that. Like, I mean, I know what you guys are talking about 100%. And I, especially the first few times, I was kind of surprised at how forgiving it was. Like,
it's just weird.
But I don't know, like, and maybe it was because I fought a few too many bosses, a little bit outgunned. But I mean, the bosses, they basically 2 to 3 shot you anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a very challenging game, even without them doing that.
Yeah, the fact that if they happen to break your posture, I mean, it was maybe a little tiny bit too forgiving, but these guys, I mean, you have to hit them like 50 times to get a death blow, and they have to hit you like 3 times if you don't parry perfectly. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I mean, if you go into some of those fights and you haven't found like the 4th or 5th prayer bead that you really should have, like, those bosses will just break your posture all over the place. And like, then if they do connect, like sometimes they'll, 2-shot you.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's it's not so much like, because I think the game's plenty hard without them punishing you.
It doesn't make it too easy.
Yeah. It's more of just, I don't know why you have a posture meter if breaking it doesn't have much effect. It's more of that. It just feels off.
Yeah, it feels off. It just ends up feeling like, oh, you're trying to warn me the whole game that this posture meter is building every time I block, and then eventually I let it slip, and I expect to get punished for it, and just nothing happens.
Yeah, I mean,
weird.
I think maybe it was a little too often that you don't get punished for it, but at the same time, like, if the boss, I think a lot of times too, the boss will break your posture like as they're finishing a combo.
Yeah. I think that's what it is.
It gives you but I mean, I have definitely had my posture broken at like much less opportune times and didn't always make it away.
Yeah, if you're really like getting beat back and they break your posture at the beginning of a combo, then you're probably going to die.
Yeah, and like if you're, I know I was fighting some fights where I ran out of potions and was having to fight at half health, and like, that's really not a position I felt comfortable in where like my posture meter wasn't regenerating that quickly. So like as the boss would come at me and start comboing, it's like, oh boy, man, like if I don't parry this stuff, like he might just knock me over. And like, especially if you're in like a low health position. I mean, I kept my posture up because even though it was forgiving more often than you would expect, like when it wasn't forgiving, like you're taking a hit from a boss that can potentially, kill you in anywhere from 2 to 4 hits. So like, it's not really where you want to be. So yeah, I didn't have a huge problem. It was maybe a little surprising.
It was more just a weird thing to me than like a huge problem.
The first time it happened, like I was kind of relieved that the boss didn't just grab me and like death blow me. But at the same time, like bosses don't need to break your posture to do that to you. Like if Genichiro grabs you, he just sticks a sword through your stomach.
Yeah.
So they don't really need to break your posture to hit you with a death blow.
It's true. Kind kind of want to make another transition here.
Sure.
We were talking about before we started this, I guess more about the world design, and like there's a lot of branching paths in this game.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could go different ways and fight different bosses and get different items in different orders. I was kind of curious to just hear people's experiences on that. Like, was there anything you felt like, oh, if I had gone this other way, I could have found this other thing, which would have helped in this sooner, or anything like that? Like, I guess just kind of compare notes on like how we like went through the world.
Yeah. So I think the game is pretty linear up until Ashina Castle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one side thing there is you can do Harada Estate at any time.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you do that as soon as it unlocks, it's pretty tough.
It's pretty hard, yeah.
Yeah, because I actually went into it as soon as I unlocked it, and I got like halfway-ish through it maybe. And I was like, okay, this is kind of tough. And then I went back and continued on towards the castle for a while.
Yeah.
Did you stop at the part where you fight the Shinobi Hunter?
That may have been it. I got far enough to get the firecrackers because I used the firecrackers on the horse boss.
Okay.
Yeah, the Shinobi Hunter is kind of far in.
Yeah, I may have gotten stuck there. That Shinobi Hunter has become like kind of a legend of being like the first like tough fight in that game.
It's really funny because like this was one of those weird things where like as people were playing this game, I kept hearing people talk about the Shinobi Hunter being so hard. And like I couldn't remember who that was.
Yeah.
And
I did have a tough time with that fight.
I thought I had missed a fight. So I like went and looked it up, and I was like, I don't know if I fought this guy. And I went back to that area, and I was like, oh yeah, I fought this guy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That was one of the weird things where like I don't remember that fight, but he is kind of like one of the first things that people point to as like, oh, this was a wall I hit.
Yeah, because I think he's a wall because he's kind of the first fight where you have to deal with one of the perilous attacks. Mm-hmm. Because like he's got too much health that you can't like it'd take forever to chip damage him down, and he's got two death blows, and his posture restores quickly enough that like through normal deflects you kind of can't, and he just straight up deals a lot of damage.
Okay.
But like if you get that Mikiri counter on him from the thrust, like that actually deals decent posture damage, and like that's kind of how you're going to get him up. But he's kind of like the first enemy in the game that really makes you do that.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. So you were saying that you went to the estate right when it opened, but then went back and fought the horse boss.
Yep.
Before finishing it.
Correct.
Yeah, I definitely was like the overly stubborn player who just like went to the estate when it opened and did the whole thing before going back to the main path.
Yeah.
Did you end up like also beating Lady Butterfly and everything?
Yeah.
Guys, I think I went to the estate basically when it opened, and maybe before I fought the ogre boss, the first little ogre. I don't know, he's kind of a mini boss or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I went to the estate, and because I think you actually get the flamethrower in the estate too.
Yeah, you get both the flamethrower. You get the flamethrower, the firecrackers, and the mist raven from the estate.
Yeah, you can get the firecrackers. You can buy those from the mob. On top of the outskirts.
I thought I bought those from.
Oh,
person.
Okay, maybe I'm misremembering wrong then.
But I think you can buy them from like 2 or 3 different mobs. So you might have found somebody at the estate.
Yeah, maybe I bought them from a mob in the estate. I don't.
Yeah, I can't remember if they're in multiple places, but I'm pretty sure I bought them in the outskirts.
But yeah, I think I went to this estate. Yeah, and it was like before I fought the ogre. Got to the Shinobi Hunter, and I think I switched back there because I was like, I mean, I was getting to where, I could death blow and everything, but yeah, just fighting him straight up, even that one round was like a huge pain. Yeah. So I bounced off, went back. Yeah, I got a memory from the horse general. And I think then I came back and made it to Lady Butterfly, but I think I might have bounced off of her again because once I saw it was a 2-round fight, and I was like, am I going to need like a bunch of snap seeds or something like that? I was like, I'll just wait till I have like better stats. That was a pretty fun fight, though. I mean, it was another one of those kind of like straight up, dueling with an opponent type fights.
Yeah, she's definitely tough. That was the first like roadblock I hit for sure.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you go straight to her without like getting closer to the castle. Like if you go, what it sounds like you did, go to the estate as soon as you can and get to her. Like,
yeah,
she's really tough for that stage of the game.
She is very tough.
Because I had a tough time with her when I went back, and I would have at least had the attack upgrade from the horse boss, and I may have had an extra prayer necklace than you did as well.
Yeah,
and she was still tough.
Yeah, that one took me a while. That was where I was like trying to perfect my shuriken throws to like knock her out of the air.
Yeah,
because she jumps around so much.
You could knock her out of the air with the shurikens. It was pretty.
Yeah, so that was like my key to victory there, was just like constantly waiting for her to jump and then shuriken her and then run in and hit her a few times.
Yeah. I ended up realizing she can be like sidestepped a lot. Like she was one of the bosses that I found that doing kind of the Dark Souls constant sidestepping was effective, but it took me a while to get to that point and get the timing down.
Yeah.
She was
I do
not
like
an easy boss.
that fight was right by a shrine too, or an idol.
There's like one random archer in between you.
That guy has probably gotten owned so many times.
Yeah, he got killed a whole bunch of times.
I hate my job.
That's great. I do in general, actually, as a broad like world design thing, I think especially compared to their other games, that the checkpoint locations were much more generous. Like there was a lot less time in between them, and especially before boss fights, I feel like the runs back to bosses were a lot less tedious.
When I think back to like Dark Souls 1 or God, even like Demon Souls especially, some of those times where you have to run from a checkpoint to a boss are ridiculous.
Yeah. So I did appreciate, and especially because this game's so much more focused on those boss fights and combat, like I appreciated just being able to get right back into them.
So I guess we were talking about progression, and I am kind of curious how you guys ended up, because I think actually once I made it past the castle gates, and I like went into the dojo, and I ran into that guy who has like, he does like the almost like the Ido, he like draws his sword really quickly, and he'll do like a double slash, and which can break your block if you don't. I ran into that guy, and I was like having kind of a tough time with this guy. And actually I had missed the Ashina arts at that point, which give you more posture damage, like more passive posture damage to enemies.
Right.
So I decided to explore around, and I ended up in the Senpo Temple. I went, I think, through the reservoir or into the abandoned dungeon. And I explored pretty far in the Senpo Temple before I came back to the castle. But it's kind of interesting because the abandoned dungeon, I only found 2 idols in the abandoned dungeon. I never did the quest with the surgeon.
Me either.
I never met the other. Apparently, there's another surgeon. I never met the other one.
Oh, huh. Yeah, me either.
Yeah, apparently there's Dogen or something like. There's like Dosaka is the one who asks you to send him somebody. Yeah, I never did that. And then there's apparently another one named Dogen, and I never met him either.
Yeah, I don't remember him either.
But yeah, so I went straight through the Senpo, did quite a bit in Senpo, and then I think I came back and did kind of finished out Ashina Castle. And I ended up, I guess because I got stuck in the abandoned dungeon, I actually made my way over the course of time, I made my way to the valley, the Mist Valley or the Mist Forest through, because apparently you can get there through the dungeon if you kill the Shichimen warrior. You can get there, I guess, kind of in the middle of the game, but I ended up going through like the gun fort, I think, and ending up in the Mist Valley that way.
Yeah.
Which seems like kind of the long way around.
Yeah, there's a few ways that those areas interconnect that are interesting.
Yeah, that was one of the big things, because I always felt like the abandoned dungeon, like the fact that I only found 2 idols.
I think
most of the game only 1 idol.
Yeah, I think that was meant more as a like connector area, because I feel like from the abandoned dungeon you could get to like the castle and Senpu Temple and the Ashina Depths, and I feel like it was kind of like almost a hub connector area. And similar to you, I got into the abandoned dungeon before I finished Ashina Castle, and I kind of stumbled my way into the Sunken Valley as well. I kind of like stumbled my way into a lot of these areas. But I didn't finish. I didn't get all the way through any of those areas before going to the top of the castle. And I'm wondering if you can even can you get all the way to the Guardian Ape before fighting the, what is his name? Ichiro at top of the castle for the first time? I don't even know, but
yeah, it would be really funny if you could get the Mortal Blade and all the ingredients needed to get to the Divine Realm before you fight Genichiro, and then you go fight Genichiro and meet up with Kuro, and he's like, "Here's what we got," and you're like, "I'm on it, I got it,
I already got it."
just lay it all at his feet. I would guess the Mortal Blade.
Oh yeah,
because there's a story piece to it, and I'm trying to remember
how you don't need it for. Huh.
Yeah, I don't know.
I made it all the way. I may have made it all the way inside that shrine, and there's a monk who gives you a letter, but you have to meet the divine child of, I guess, the false divine child or whatever to get the Mortal Blade. And I don't remember if I just got turned around or if the game actually, because you have to ring the bell to get there, and I either missed that at that point or the game just doesn't let you until you.
I could see it just not letting you.
Yeah,
that's possible. Yeah, I'm not sure what the gates are there. Like you were saying earlier, this game's fairly linear up through the castle the first time, but once you get to the castle, you can
go pretty much anywhere.
Go almost anywhere, and there are the 3 things you need to get. One's at Senpu Temple, one's at the end of the valley, and then the other one's down at the bottom of the depths.
Beating the Guardian Ape and not having the Immortal or the Mortal Blade would just be such a bummer.
That's what I did.
Oh, you did? So you beat the Guardian Ape and you Blade?
Well, so it's not the Guardian Ape, it's the Headless Ape that you need the Mortal Blade.
Yeah.
Did he just stand back up and
I did it for no. Okay, so I went my playthrough, because I'm the way I am, was that I did all the Harada State, like I said earlier, and then I went through the whole Ashina Castle and beat Genichiro and met Kuro, and then he said, "Okay, we gotta go get these things to get the Divine Realm, and we're probably gonna need this Mortal Blade too."
Yep.
And for some reason, my brain said, "Oh, we need these other things to get the Mortal Blade." So I'm not going to go to the temple now because I'm just going to hit a wall. I'm going to go to the other places first. That's great. That's what my brain decided. I don't think he said that. I think I just decided that.
Okay.
And so
where did you go first?
So I went to the Sunken Valley and fought the Guardian Ape.
Great.
Which is the great moment of you cutting off his head. And it giving you the Shinobi execution.
Okay, this is one of I was going to bring this up when we got to talking about bosses if we didn't sooner. But this is one of my favorite moments of the entire game.
It's one of the best moments of any game ever.
It is pretty messed up.
It's so great. And they give you the Shinobi execution
Yeah.
words on screen.
It's like everything is the way it happens when you beat any other boss in the game. You cut off his head,
uh,
and he falls
and it
down,
looks done.
and you're done. And you start walking away if you're like me. And then the music picks back up, and you turn around, and this weird, wiggly, headless ape is coming at you with a sword.
Oh man, I didn't trust it. I had learned, I think, because it's funny because I had went through Senpo Temple first, and like I said, I don't know if it was gated or just a little lost, but I had fought those infested enemies.
Right, so I hadn't seen any of the centipede guys or anything like that.
So let me tell you about New Londo Ruins.
That was a great moment though.
But then, yeah, you finish off him, the headless ape, there, and he just fell down, and I didn't have the mortal blade.
Yep.
So I was just like looking at his body, like laying there, and I'm like, "Are you gonna get back up again? What are we doing here?"
So
he just hangs out.
Right.
Oh, so he just lays there dead, but he doesn't get back up. Okay.
But that's how it is, even because I had the mortal blade when I fought him, and at that point, that's the same thing that happens. The mortal blade doesn't make a difference. It's when you fight the headless ape again, near the poison pool, that having the mortal blade makes the difference.
Right.
Okay. I do remember you needed it in one of those fights.
Yeah.
And I was just imagining, like, if you beat the 2-rounder with the guardian ape into the headless ape, and then like you didn't have the mortal blade and he just gets back up, I would be like so bummed.
Yeah. No, that one he stays down whether you have the mortal blade or not, and then but it's when you fight him near the poison pool.
Yeah.
If I don't know what happens if you don't have the mortal blade, because I have it, but that's when you get the mortal blade strike and it says immortality severed.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happens if you don't.
If you don't have the mortal blade, he still just stays down.
Okay.
And like when I eventually, so I did the Sunken Valley and the first Guardian Ape fight, and then did the Depths and the second headless fight.
Yeah.
And he just stayed down, and I was like, man, this guy's a real jerk. He just keeps coming back. I guess I'm going to see him again later.
Yeah. Did you ever go back to that spot?
And then, yeah, I eventually, when I went to the temple after that and got the mortal blade, I was like, I wonder. And I went back and just like warped back to that room, and he's just laying there, and you just walk up and stab him.
Nice. Oh, okay. So the boss fight is done. You just have to like, because a lot of the regular enemies, like they'll just stand back up if you don't.
Yeah. No, it's not that way.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mortal Blade, did you guys kill? Was this Hanbei the Infested?
Yeah. I definitely killed him.
Who is he?
The training guy near the sculptor's temple.
Oh, you can permanently kill him with the mortal blade. Yeah,
with the mortal blade, you can be like, "Oh, I have this now," and he's like, "Hey, could you do me a solid and like
great.
kill me because I don't want to be alive anymore."
I never did that.
When I started, when I got the mortal blade, that was like one of the first things that popped to my mind.
Me too. I'm gonna go release Hanbei from his eternal torment, and he was happy about it.
I talked to him once, realized he was a tutorial guy, and never interacted with him. That's really cool. I feel like this game has a lot of cool touches like that.
Yeah,
I did.
My progression was very different from Nate's.
Yeah.
Oh,
the polar opposite. And this is basically the way I've developed into playing all of From Software's games. Is when there's multiple ways to go, I pick one. I go that way until I reach something, moderately challenging. And then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go pick a different path and go as far as I can there. And basically the thought process is I never know what I'm gonna find on a path that may help me on another path.
Yeah.
So I constantly bounced around. It was like I said, I went through the Rada Estate until it probably was that Hunter. I don't remember exactly, but I went there until something was tripping me up, and then went back to the castle. At some point when I was going through the castle, and you have access to start getting access to those other areas, I started bouncing around. I think I got like halfway through the valley. I think I got like decent way. I think I got to the poison pool. I think I got, halfway through the Senpu Temple before I finally killed Genichiro.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like I went like halfway through basically those other 3 paths. Killed Genichiro, and then I think I literally got to the Guardianate boss and the Corrupted Monk boss before killing either of them. Like I went through all areas like kind of simultaneously in parallel.
Wow.
I did finish the temple. Once I finished Genichiro, I did go straight through the temple, the Senpu Temple, because that seemed to be the easier of those other 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of stuck with that one and didn't really hit a wall, so I just kind of went straight through. But yeah, a lot of my general playing of this game was just constantly bouncing around. And eventually you'd get to a point where it's like, all right, I don't have like all of the paths I've gone down, like have something kind of difficult. So now I just got to pick one and buckle down and do it.
So side note there, how did you like the monkey, I don't know, what were they called? The illusion monkeys or whatever?
Screen monkeys.
Folding screen monkeys. That's right. What did you think of that?
I found that fight to be dumb.
Yeah.
I've never, like, all of their games have one quote unquote puzzle boss.
Which is using the term puzzle very loosely.
Yes, very loosely. And I've never liked any of them. I just, like, I get the idea of trying to break up the constant fighting of the other bosses.
I get it. It's fine with me. Like, it didn't bother me. I get it. But yeah, I didn't think it was anything worthwhile.
Yeah, I did not find it interesting at all. Like, I didn't bother me that it was in there. It just wasn't interesting to me.
Did you guys actually like engage with what it was supposed to be doing and like try to use the different rooms?
Nope.
I ran around like an idiot.
Yeah, I ran around like an idiot for 10 minutes and eventually killed them because there was no threat anywhere in that room, in that arena.
Well, it's funny actually, because I think I snuck up on 2 of them, because it's like one has great sight, one of them will alert the others if he spots you. Mm-hmm. So if you're careful, you can just sneak around and get behind those 2, as long as you're not in front of them. But then the hearing one, like, I had a lot of trouble getting to him, and I kept having to reset because also the other 2, once you kill them, keep respawning.
Yeah.
So they had these like
but they're
rooms.
not like challenging. They'll just, it's not like they're respawning and you have to kill them to progress. They like are a weird shadow version that just kind of runs at you.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want to burn all my resources fighting these things though. Yeah. So like, it was hard to stay still. It was also hard to sneak when those things were coming at you. Yeah, because they pretty much always knew where you were. I kept having to restart because just running at that monkey like never worked out for me. There was supposed to be like this waterfall room where he couldn't hear you, but he would never go that way. Mm-hmm. But then eventually I just found that like you can restart it. There's a bell underneath him. So you run and ring it and it like stuns him. Mm-hmm. You just kill him. Yeah. It was like that simple the whole time. But I spent all this time like trying to chase him in a circle, trying to box him in, like, while these, I couldn't sneak up on him because these stupid other monkeys were chasing me around. Like, it's so aggravating. Yeah. Sorry, I kind of derailed your train of thought there, Flex.
No, it's fine. I basically described my path anyway. That actually might be a good transition because one of the main things I wanted to talk were like the different bosses and like kind of what bosses stuck out to you for whatever reason. And that, we were just talking about the folding screen monkeys. So yeah, did you guys have like memorable for good or for ill like bosses or mini boss encounters that stuck out to you? I certainly had some. Freaking 7 Spears Ashina, anyone?
Wait, is that he's like the mini boss like when you're making your way to the final boss fight?
He reappears. Yeah,
he exists twice in this game. The first time you fight him, when you go back to the Ashina Reservoir, which is where the tutorial area is. When you re-unlock that area, he's standing at the top of the stairs, in front of the building where Kuro was in the tutorial.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I remember that actually. Yep.
I legitimately think he killed me more than any other boss or mini boss in the game. Like, I legitimately think he was the hardest enemy for me in this game.
So, did you sneak around and start the fights with a death blow?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's still hard. I mean, he almost one-shot me. So, like,
yeah, he does a ton of damage.
He does so much damage, and he's really fast despite how big he is. And I think what it was is he was one of the first enemies that really had what we were talking about earlier of having a wide variety of attack patterns, including multiple types of perilous attacks he could use. And I think he was just, in addition to just dealing crap tons of damage and being fast, I found his attacks really hard to read, to the point where, like, I would sneak up on him, death blow one of his 2 life bars away, and then he would just go Super Saiyan and, like, whirl his spear around 3 times, and I died. It's like,
I remember that being an awkward, like, arena, because although nobody else is around, kind of like fighting on this cliff edge. And it always felt like when he just started, like you said, kind of going ham with the spear, it's like, do I need to, like, not fall off this cliff?
Yeah.
It's like no jumping backwards. Like, I think I might have jumped off the cliff once by accident.
Yeah. I don't know that I actually fell off a cliff in that fight, but I did in other fights, and I know I got close in that fight a lot. Yeah. It's a weird, it's kind of a tight arena, and he pushes you around a lot. That was also one of the few boss fights or mini bosses where the checkpoint wasn't near him. So you actually had to go through a lot of regular enemies just to get back to that fight. And maybe that made it feel more tedious, but I thought he was a hard fight, for sure. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, he appears again later on when everything's on fire, right near the Demon of Hatred. But he was hard then too.
I do remember I remember both fights now that you mention it. The first time I may have been like, I think I came back to that one a little bit later. So he killed me, I think, a couple times, but eventually I don't remember that one standing out as like, one of the tougher fights, at that point where I was at. But then, yeah, the second time I remember having to fight him, and
he has a buddy with him.
He has a friend, and I found that if you use the like the candy or the headless power, you could sneak between them and kill one or death blow one. So I started with him, which after a couple rounds I found out no, that's totally the wrong thing to do. It's easier to kill his friend and just fight him for 2 rounds than to start him with 1 round, because I think we talked about it, like fighting against multiple opponents in that game, especially hard opponents like that, is just like bad. And that arena too, like it's like on fire, and like there are like these walls that'll block your camera if you get cornered. So like,
it's a tough arena. I died from like fire damage in that arena multiple times. So you stopped one short of how I dealt with that fight, which was use the headless power to be stealthy, sneak up on his friend and deathblow him, but use the puppeteer ability on his friend to even the odds a little bit with Mr. 7 Spears there.
That's hilarious. I didn't do that, but that is pretty great.
And that made me very happy because 7 Spears is a jerk. I got a couple other fights to shout out, but let you guys shout out some if you want first.
I mean, we talked about the Shichimen warriors. When I figured that fight out, it was easy, but every time I tried before then, it was like, this is pointless. I liked the last boss fight, but I did, I think, run into it a little early. Because I guess we were talking about routes, and when I went to the Divine Realm, I mean, I explored part of it, but I kind of like went around the side, swam through the cavern, and then from there I was like, oh, okay, this is the way forward. I'll just keep going. And then when I got to the end game, I kind of, the castle's burning and you can reopen, it closes off all these idols you've already visited, but I didn't pay attention to any of that. I just went straight to the Genichiro fight. Cause I was kind of ready to be done at that point, but also like, that's kind of the direction you're given. It's like, hey, they left smoke signals for you, go out this way. Like,
yeah.
And I was like, okay, I want to go save, Lord Kuro, like, finish this, do the job, and then you fight Genichiro, and it's like, oh, we come full circle, and you fight, it's sort of tough fight. You dealt with him before, and like, so you beat him after a couple tries, and then Ashina pops out, and I'm
my man, Ishin springs reincarnated as his younger self, fully formed from Genichiro's neck.
That's a total like grotesque from soft.
Yeah, that was one of the two moments of that game where it just went like full Bloodborne or something, and it was just like, no, there's an arm protruding from this guy's neck.
What a guy this man is.
Man. But then I got to that fight, and it was like, he has 3 more health bars.
Yeah,
and I was like, so then I learned like how to deal with his first form, but that was such a grind. Like, I think I was I was definitely a little bit under leveled, because I hadn't fought the flame demon.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a cool fight. It just got kind of frustrating to like have to slog through Genichiro, and then like, you fight the first form, and then in the second form where I was at, he could literally, when he does his thrust attack with the spear, he follows it up with this like pull, and if he hits you with the thrust and the pull, like he was literally just kill me.
Mm-hmm.
So I slogged through that a few times, and then I was like, okay, I know I've missed some stuff, and I think even at this final section, the game has opened up a bit. So I went back through the Divine Realm. I went back through the castle, the burning castle, the outskirts, found the flame demon. I actually found the dragon mask. And so,
I was going to ask, because I think all of us got the dragon mask assembled and was able to upgrade strength. Is that true?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Did you guys use it? I did one time.
I did once or twice.
I did it twice, I think.
It was expensive, man.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, I felt like I had all the skills I wanted.
Yeah, at some point I looked at the skill tree and was like, I don't really need any of this stuff. I'll just dump 5 skill points into a higher attack.
Yeah. Another question I was going to ask in general is, were you guys fairly completionists? It sounds like, Ryan, maybe you weren't.
I mean, I wasn't super completionist, but then when I got stuck on the final boss, I was like, okay, I went back through the Hirata estate. I looked for the treasure cart scales because I wanted to get the mask. Like, I didn't know what it did, but I was like, I'm looking for any edge I can get here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I found the Demon of Flame. I tried to find some of the stuff with the Great Cart, but I couldn't. I could tell there was a section of that divine area where there was some stuff I hadn't fought, but I couldn't figure out how to get over there. Because the pot nobles give you the special bait, and I was like, I don't know where to use this.
That Fountainhead area, by the way, I found that area really confusing to navigate. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, it's not easy.
When I first went through there, it was pretty straightforward because I kept meeting the old ladies, and they're like, okay, you should go around this way, you should swim through this thing, and that's what I did, and it worked out.
But once I got past the area with all the Mist Nobles and you start like climbing all of that vertical area in the back, I kept getting really turned around.
Yeah, and it was easy to like fall off of all the platforms and end up in a like lower area where it was like, okay, I guess I'll just warp back to the last idol because it's going to take forever to walk back around.
Also, there's a Shichiman warrior down there.
Yeah, there is.
By the time I I found him. That was after I had killed the other one. I like knew all the tricks.
Yeah.
And so
I put on my purple hat.
the funny thing about that one too is basically you hit him a few times and he teleports to the other side of the river.
Yeah.
So as soon as I saw him start fading out, I would just sprint to the other side, and like before he even started his attack, I would be behind him.
Yeah. So did both of you kill the great carp?
I did not. I couldn't figure out how to.
You had to feed him. I ended up killing him, and you have to feed him a specific kind of bait because there's the worker next to him that lets you feed.
Yeah, I fed him one of the pot nobles bait.
Yeah, but there's.
I couldn't find that section.
I thought.
Actually,
Well, I'm sorry, Ryan.
I couldn't find that section.
Yeah,
like I looked for.
It was a little tricky.
Yeah, it was hard to get over there.
Yeah.
I think that's what you had to feed him was the bait from the.
I mean, if that killed it, then I didn't realize that. He seemed to vanish from the map after I did that.
The pot noble in
the truly precious bait is what you had to feed him.
Yeah.
So there's precious bait and truly precious.
Yeah, I gave him truly precious bait from one of the pot nobles, and then that noble turned into a carp.
I think both of the pot nobles give you a truly precious bait.
Yeah, they do.
One of them from the Harada estate and one of them from Fountainhead.
Mm-hmm.
And the one in Fountainhead tells you if you ever meet the other one, don't trust him because he tried to kill the carp once or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably the one in the Harada estate.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I gave the carp the bait from the guy from the Harada estate. And then the carp vanished. I didn't know what happened to it. I think
he died.
Okay.
I think that's what happened. Like he vanished because he died. So you did kill it.
Okay. And then I went back to the other guy, and he's just a carp hanging out there.
Oh, that didn't happen to me. I talked to him or his daughter, and freed him from his duty, and he died or whatever.
Hmm.
I don't know. I forget the exact details, but anyway.
Yeah.
I guess circling all the way back to we were talking about the final boss.
You mentioning the carp noble thing because I saw kind of the story hints about that, but I didn't find that part. But one other thing I thought was interesting is I felt like there were some hints that, and this is actually a good segue because you were talking about interesting bosses. I felt like there were some story hints around the woman who was crying, Ore of the Waters.
Oren of the Water, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what her deal was.
She was very sad.
I felt like maybe the item descriptions were hinting maybe if you use the malcontent on her, something would happen.
I could see that.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I remember because you get this information where the Guardian, where you are supposed to fight the Headless Ape in the Poison Pool, and if you buy the information from the vendor, he says, hey, the Headless Ape has been spotted in this area, and it's also there was also the sound of a woman's voice crying. Mm-hmm. And then you fight him, and he gives you the ring, the Kingfisher ring that you have to use to forge the malcontent, which is said to reach into the spirit realm. So I was wondering, I didn't have it at that point, and when I saw her, I just tried to walk past her.
Yeah, and she'll fight you.
Yeah, it's she's playing the lute and crying, and I walk up to her, and I chose to say nothing and walk past her, and she's like, "Are you trying to ignore me?"
Yep.
And I was like, "Yep, this is happening."
She was actually worth fighting because I was looking this up when we were talking about it earlier. She was the one who gave you the other passive to restore health on a death blow.
Okay.
So she's very much worth fighting for that. Yeah, I actually was very completionist with this game. I think I got basically everything you could get on one run, including all the prayer beads, and I think I beat every boss and all that stuff. I really appreciate, we were talking about the final boss. I actually really appreciated, I I may have died more on Seven Spears, but I do think the final boss was probably the hardest boss for me.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate, like, it wasn't a tricky boss. It was just like, hey,
Right.
use the stuff you've been learning all game and you have to execute it well. And I feel like not all of their games have been that, where it's like the final boss is kind of the toughest challenge of the game's basic concepts. So I really appreciated that fight. I like that fight a lot.
Yeah, I absolutely love the final boss. That's my favorite fight.
I'm not sure if it's my favorite fight. It's up there. I really, really liked both of the fights with Owl.
Oh, yeah.
He felt like he employed a lot of your shinobi tricks as well. Like
definitely.
He would use a lot of your tools and, you know, those kind of things. And I thought it was a very, like, tactical fight where, like, you were kind of trying to both outmaneuver and outsmart him. And I really liked that fight, especially the second one where he started using, like, firecrackers and smoke bombs and that kind of stuff.
He definitely knocked me out of the air with shrooms once, at least.
Yeah.
I was like, well played, sir.
Yeah, he was really cool. And the second fight was really thematic too. You fight him in the room where Lady Butterfly was.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, okay. I unfortunately missed that, and I was really bummed about it.
Yeah, I wish that was easier to find, because you had to jump through some hoops to. Basically, there's like a second version of the Hirata Estates.
Okay, I didn't see that either.
Yeah, that you can go back to.
Yeah,
it's on the path.
You have to do some stuff before a certain point in the game, or else I would have gone back and done it.
Yeah, but it's like
fighting
the Divine Dragon is the point of no return. Is that right?
I think so. Like once a Ashina Castle has been attacked, you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, you like it's meant to be one of the endings because you get an item from Owl in that fight that lets you trigger one of the different endings.
Okay.
And you have to jump through some hoops to get there. But yeah, there are two other mini bosses which aren't that interesting. They like reset the area with tougher regular enemies, and there are two more mini bosses. It's another drunkard and another one of the purple ninjas in the estate. And then when you get back to Lady Butterfly's room, there's a second fight with Owl, and that was a cool fight. He was fairly similar to the top of the castle, but he had more tricks, and he could also turn into an owl and fly at you and dive bomb you. He had the most ridiculous thrust attack of anyone in the game. He would spread firecrackers out in front of him, and that would basically like blind you. He would just have like this black smoke wall, and he would like jump back, and like you wouldn't be able to see him because he's behind the smoke wall, and he would like just do this thrust across like the entire room through the smoke.
Oh wow!
You. Yeah, so you're like, I know he's coming through the smoke sometime. I got to be ready for it.
His attacks, even in his first form, like because he's so lanky and he's really old looking, but then he just starts like, I mean, sometimes he does these comically slow attacks where he like throws the item that like prevents you from healing. But then like other times he just like runs at you and like just slashes at you super fast.
Yeah, my favorite attacks from him in that first fight on top of Ashina Castle was when he'd like carefully pose himself very steadily and like chuck that little orb like 2 feet in front of him, and he's just like very delicately like, oh, let me toss this orb.
Yeah, I would be like, no, get away! What are you doing?
That cracked me up every time. I'm like, what are you doing, you goober? But yeah.
You were talking about.
I really like both of those fights.
I was going to mention you were talking about the Hirata estate, and I do like that one fight. It's not really a hard fight necessarily, but where the samurai kind of charges at that group of enemies, right outside of the Hirata estate.
Oh yeah.
You like
the
fight
first
your way.
drunkard fight that you do. There's that guy who. Run in with you and fight with you and scream. I thought he was hilarious.
Yeah, that was such a funny section because yeah, you like fight your way and like you're having to fight through these groups of enemies and it's kind of tough. And then I see a samurai standing there with his back to me, so I like sneak up on him. I'm like, okay, I can't attack him. He might be friendly. And then I talk to him and he's like, yeah, things are bad. Like, I need to die with honor. Like, I hope you'll fight beside me. And then he like pulls out his sword and there's this huge group of enemies and like a boss. And I'm like, wait, what are you doing? Like, come back. But he's pretty useful. Like in that fight, that was kind of a funny section.
Yeah, that guy cracked me up.
Mm-hmm.
He just like runs and screams into the fight.
Speaking of boss fights, so snake sections.
Yeah, not a fan of.
How do you guys like?
Section.
How do you guys like those snake sections? That was a boss, right?
I guess. I mean, I thought they were fine. They were basically stealth sections.
Yeah, I could have done without them.
Yeah. They didn't bother me. Like, I don't think I ever had to try any of them more than once.
First one I had to try a couple times.
Yeah, I got hit on a couple of them because some of them you had to find specific places to hide or whatever.
The really funny one was if you were trying to get the snake heart or whatever in the Sunken Valley.
What did those do, by the way?
That was for one of the endings.
Yeah, for one of the endings, you need 2 of the snake hearts. One's alive and one's dead, I think.
I got both of the hearts. I don't know what they did.
Yeah, you have to go through a bunch of silly stuff to get that ending, and that's just one of the steps to have both of those items.
Yeah.
But to get that one in the Sunken Valley, you're supposed to use the puppeteer ninjutsu on the monkey.
We were talking about
it. We talked about that earlier when you stepped.
Okay, yeah, I had to step away. I totally just like got through that through like pure BS.
Nice.
Man, you had a way with the snake then.
It was like not something I did correctly. I just like tried to jump past it and he hit me and it didn't quite kill me. And it like sent me flying straight to the door of the room.
Nice.
I just walked in.
This is like speedrunner stuff here.
Oh man, that's pretty great. Yeah, I didn't really love the snake. They were kind of to me like the folding monkeys. Is like they were just whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've been going on for a while. I think it might be good to go ahead and wrap this up. I think we've been going for almost 2 hours. I think it's clear that there's a lot to talk about with this game. I think we could probably talk for even longer.
Yeah, we could probably do another 2-hour one just on like the actual characters and like lore and setting.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to dig into. Maybe we'll do a second one at some point. Who knows? But I think that's probably good for this one.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap it with some final thoughts. I very much like this game a lot. Primarily, kind of what we talked about up front is just I really like the combat in this game and the very thoughtful and clever ways they like explored all of the angles of that combat throughout the game. By the end of the game, I was just like really getting into the boss fights. Like I really liked the owl fights, the final boss. I actually did really like the ape fights.
Yes,
they were very different, but I got into those fights too. And I mean, I like the environment, exploring the environments in the similar way I have to all of From's other games. But I really just like the purity of focus on the combat, and I just really like this combat. And I kind of feel like that's what this game lives and dies by to a certain extent, is combat.
Yeah.
And the big showpiece fights. There are a couple things we've mentioned along the way. Like I wish some things had been clear. I don't like the like consumable items and having to farm for those for some things. That kind of stuff, which has been in some of their games already. And I like this game like aesthetically too. Like we didn't end up talking much about like the game's art or story stuff and whatever, but I really like this game, like artistically and thematically and stuff. I think it's really cool. But yeah, I think my main takeaway is the combat though, and the big fights. It's definitely a game I really enjoyed, and I think it's a really good like step for that studio. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's different enough. It obviously shares a lot, but I think it's different enough that it didn't feel just like doing the same thing over again. And I really enjoyed that.
It's cool. Like, I mean, I didn't play Dark Souls 3, but it's cool that they, between Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and then between Bloodborne and Sekiro, they've kept some of that core DNA that makes those games kind of memorable, but then, not made them feel like basically copy-paste sequels or whatever.
Yeah. Like, I did not want Dark Souls 4. I wanted Sekiro.
Yeah.
So what about you guys? What are your kind of wrap-up thoughts for Sekiro?
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I think if I was going to say like the one thing that I kind of miss from the Dark Souls games was that I never felt a sense of danger just exploring an environment.
Right.
Which is, just a different thing. Like, Dark Souls is full of traps and ledges you'll fall off, and like random enemies hiding behind
a giant skeleton around a corner that'll this is Sparta, kick you off a cliff.
Exactly. And this game just doesn't have that stuff. Like, it doesn't have fall damage in the same way. It doesn't have traps.
You missed that?
But at the end of the day, this Sekiro's combat clicks with me so much more than the Souls games have ever done.
Yeah.
So,
it's crazy because I feel like when they came out, I really enjoyed combat in the Souls games, and now like thinking back, and Bloodborne as well, and like now thinking back, it's like I don't think I could go back to that.
It would be hard, yeah. It's just like two meat sacks hitting each other back and forth. Whereas Sekiro feels so much more refined.
Yeah.
I love it. I would play any number of boss fights that they would release for this game or any potential sequels.
Yeah, I wonder if they will do a direct sequel.
I expect they will, but I guess we'll have to see.
Maybe they'll do Bloodborne 2 next.
Yeah, like
what about Demon's Souls 2?
I just want more of this game's combat, more of these boss fights. Like, that's what I want.
What if they just put out a DLC pack? Like, what if they put out an expansion pack that was just like a dozen boss fights and nothing else?
I mean, that would be the game for me, right? Like,
it's like
Sekiro boss rush game.
This cinematic gameplay, like the stories, like stealth assassinating people, like that's all for someone else.
Like, take out the stats, take out the skill trees, take out the upgrades, take out the stealth and the like minor enemies. Just give me 20 boss fights. I'll do it.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not really a boss rush type person like you are, but like, man, like that was my favorite part of this game by far, was the boss. Like, absolutely. I enjoyed exploring the areas as well, but the boss fights were the highlights.
Yeah. I like most of the other stuff just fine.
Yeah.
But that is the thing that I love about this game, is just that core combat and the way they apply it in their boss fights.
Yep. What about you, Ryan? What are your takeaway thoughts from Sekiro?
Yeah, I really liked it. I don't know if it would top, my memory of Dark Souls, but I do think the action is great and probably better. Arguably better. And I do like the stealth gameplay and the cinematic stuff that it does, and like, being able to grapple around and kind of around. I think it's pretty solid. I mean, obviously you have to buckle up for the occasional frustrations and occasional stuff with platforming and things like that. But yeah, it's really good. That doesn't take away too much from it. Just something for me to nitpick. I am kind of curious. So did you guys plan on doing any, I guess this game has a new game plus?
Yeah. And all their games have.
Yeah.
Part of me would kind of like to.
I'm pretty confident that I'm going to do that soon.
I don't know if I will for time reasons, but I kind of would like to.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing I didn't mention, but we've talked about, is I do like. I mean, sometimes it's very obscure, but I do like how the game puts little hints of lore and things like that. So, like,
Yeah.
We talked about not luring anybody to the surgeon, and I know one of the people that you can lure to him shows up later in the game, in the village or whatever.
Yeah.
The samurai. So
Yeah.
I kind of like those.
Dies near where Orin is.
Or like the way you can kill Hanbei once you get the Mortal Blade. Like, it remembers those little details of like, oh,
yeah,
this person is afflicted by this thing, or there's this interaction with this item or thing you discover.
Yeah.
So I like the way that the Souls game kind of weaves some of that very subtly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought there was a lot of clever stuff around that as well.
So that's it for me.
It's a fun game, yeah, for sure. And like you, I actually struggle with, do I like this? Is like my memory of first Dark Souls is so strong. It's like, do I like it overall more than this? I definitely like the combat more, but there's also other things that are like made Dark Souls really memorable. But like it's up there. I like this game a lot.
I like this game better than Bloodborne. I think almost without question. Better than Dark Souls? Probably not for me, but
yeah, this is a weird case where
it's a different kind of game, and it's
yeah. I think me playing this Sekiro has somehow diminished my opinion of Bloodborne, which I liked before, but now I'm like, I can't imagine playing Bloodborne now because it's just like a less good action game.
It's like somewhere in between the place where you don't want to be.
Yeah, because I feel like the very like Cliff Notes compare and contrast is I feel like Dark Souls is very exploration focused, and I like that, and I don't think Bloodborne or Sekiro are quite so exploratory.
Yeah,
and I feel like Bloodborne was there, and that also comes with Dark Souls just having so much more customization options.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Bloodborne was their attempt to like force the player to like engage with the combat more and it be more of an action game. And I feel like Sekiro, kind of what Nate was alluding to, is like Sekiro just kind of came along and was a more competent action game for the combat. But that's a whole nother conversation, I guess. But yeah, I think it's safe to say we all enjoyed Sekiro quite a bit.
Yep.
It is a good video game. I enjoyed it. And with that, I think we're going to sign off here. I'm sure we will talk about Sekiro on a podcast in some form or another down the road.
I'm pretty
maybe around the end of the year.
Yeah.
If not sooner. But for now, we are going to sign off of this spoiler cast, ATACS special edition for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I have been Flex, joined by Ryan and Nate. We hope you have enjoyed listening, and stay tuned for next time. We will see you later.